If you wanted to make the hover state a little bit more dramatic, we can also do something where we give this A fill a border. So let's actually give the hover state a border. So let's say border is maybe 5 pixels, solid, and let's do black. Let's do, okay, all right. And then you'll notice also that whenever I do that, because the way that that is, it's bumping it on the inside, and the reason it's pushing that border on the inside, it's not actually pushing on the inside, it's making the interior of the A smaller to accommodate the border, and that's because of this box sizing, all right? So just so you understand that that's why that's happening. But you'll notice that there's a little bit of a shift with where the number 01, 02, and so forth moves, right? And so if you don't like that, then what you would need to do is you'd need to create that as an offset for the hover state, so that if you look here, let's see, let's find this, where we would need to actually create a border that already exists on A fill, right? And so we'd need to say border is, let's do 5 pixels, and we'll do solid, but this time we're going to do RGBA, and we're going to do 0, 0, 0, but we're going to do 0, right? So that the border doesn't appear, and see now the numbers don't jump any longer, right? All right, they're not moving whenever we hover over it, which is kind of nice. The other thing that you could do if you wanted, you could create a transition. So we'll say transition right there. And we're going to make a transition for the border. And then we can also say that it's going to be an ease effect. And we can say that it's going to happen like, let's say 0.5 seconds. So that it doesn't just immediately just show up or not show up. It kind of like, it's a little jumpy actually. It's a little fussy. I'm not sure that I I really like the border easing in like that, to be quite honest. Let's see what happens if I change it to linear, if it makes a difference. It's a little bit better, but it's not perfectly better. Let's see if we do linear gradient. Yeah, it doesn't really make a, that's the same as just having a regular old hover, right? And so maybe we could have it happen faster. And when it comes in faster, it's still a little jumpy. The other thing that we could also do is we can also, oh, maybe part of it too. Let's see if we change this from RGBA, leave it RGBA down here too. And let's say that we're going to make it go to 1. That's only slightly better. I'm not sure that it's that much better, to be honest. But the other thing that we can do as well as that is we can also fade the background. So let's do background, comma. And so you can see that the background isn't just jumping in, it's kind of also easy. Let's do it on an ease. It's easing in a little bit. Okay. And then, yeah. Yeah, so it goes down to 0. Let's change this background so that you can see the change a little bit better, right? Actually, I'm not real crazy about that transition. I don't think it's happening very smoothly, so I'm just going to comment that out for a minute. I think I'm fine with it just popping in like this. That's okay. But I think that I don't need that background color to be quite so heavy on the anchor tag, so we can maybe knock that down to 4 or even 3. I think that that's adequate because we still want it to be visible. We still want it to look like something that you'd want to hover over or click or whatever, right? And so now the other thing that if you wanted to do, I mean, you could leave it just like this, right? That'd be fine. But you could also make it so that whenever you hover over this, like this background goes dark, on both of these and the text becomes light. That could be kind of cool too, right? So if we're going to do that, let's just let's come down here and let's take a look at what we had done before with this previously with the select class. Remember, this is one where we said, okay, well, if we hover over it and then we also at the same time are choosing the item that's the sibling that's directly after the hover, then we can change it. It's the same kind of principle. So like, I'm just going to copy this for a second. Let's just copy this. Make sure I get that ending curly brace, and I'm going to paste it here. So it's not going to do anything because I don't have a select class anymore. I took it out of there. I'm not using it. But what I can do is I can look at these other rules that I had written, where I've got the expressions and the odds and evens, right? So if you think about this, like this is an odd. If I hover over this, then I want this to change. So I could just do odd, right? I could do, you know, something. I don't need something as complex as this. I could do something just, you know, like this, but instead of even, I could do odd. Here, let's just come down to the bottom. All right. And I'm going to rewrite this, where instead of it saying select, I'm going to write it the way that it was up above, where I had section and then all children, right? And then whose pseudo class is nth child odd. Like this, hover. Let's copy this again, copy, and then I'm going to change this where get rid of that select class, and I'm just going to hover right over that. And so now whenever I hover over this, you can see what's happening, right? You can see that it's working for me, which is pretty cool because it's every odd one. So that would be number 1. Oh, and it's number 1 plus the sibling that's sitting directly after it. So it'd be this div. All right. And then number 3, this says number 2, but it's 1, 2, 3. And then it's direct sibling. All right. 5 and 6, 6 and 7, right? 7 and 8. Or I guess I miscounted, whatever. But you get the idea, right? So it's the odd ones are going to be on the left, the evens are on the right. And so I can just have it do something like that where it goes to, you know, pure black or something like that. Or if I wanted it to be almost pure black, you know, I could do something like that. Because if you remember, I've got this black border, maybe I want the border to stand out a little bit. So I could even do 3, 3, 3, for instance. All right. Something like that. Okay. So that's kind of interesting, right? And then if you were to look back at that other example that I had made the rest of the page kind of interesting. That part's a little bit easy, you know, compared to the rest of this. But what I will show you is how I limited the scaling of this to sort of prevent it from getting too big or too small. And so in order to do that, I want to go back up here where I've got all of my original rules, and the thing that I actually want to control is I want to control this row, right? So I've got section row. Where is that? I guess it is down here after all. Yeah, right here. So we've got row, and if I want to change the row class, then and actually, you know what? I do want it to not just be row, because remember we've got these columns, and then maybe the columns I want to behave. If I ever wanted to just turn that off, turn it back on, maybe I do want it to actually be on the section. Okay, so let's go up here and we'll say section like this, and we'll give this a max width, let's say of, just so we can see it really easily, let's say 800 pixels. I'd probably let it get bigger than that, but just so I can see what's happening here. You see that it maxes out at 800, and then I need to fix the margins so that they go automatically to the left and right with a split. So we'll say margin like this, and we'll say auto. All right, and that'll put automatic margins all the way around. That way it stays in the center. Okay. And then the next thing that I can do is, let's say that I want a min width, because that starts to get a little bit awkward. All right, so I can do a minimum width. And probably what I would really do is write, write a media query for this. But let's do it for right now. Let's do min width. And let's just say that the min width is 500 pixels for the moment. And you see that it stops getting smaller. This part just keeps getting smaller. The number does, right? I don't have a min width on that. So I could put a min width on that. But I would probably need to write a media query. In fact, let's do like maybe 480, because that's a standard breakpoint for some media devices, or for some screen devices. All right, and so, I could do something like this. And then maybe I'd want to put also a min width on, or a min, font size. I could do that so that it stops scaling. But again, that needs to be a media query. All right, and so the other thing that I then could also go do is I can give the body a background color. Actually, let's do this. This flex box, this thing up here, right? It's a header. So let's just give, let's make some rules up here, like for header, for instance. And then we'll give that a background color. Let's do something kind of crazy, like magenta, like some crazy bright color. And then you'll notice that it's kind of small. So what I would also need to do, let's go ahead and terminate that. I also want to tell it to have margin of 0. And that's not, and the thing is because it's an H1, it's the margins that are being applied are actually on the H1 too. So I can actually just add to this header rule, and I can put a comma there and say that it also applies to the H1. And then I can also, let's see, let's make the color, let's do the color white. So we'll do FFF, right? And then we've got that. Oh, and the other thing that's happening is that we have a padding on the body. That's right, I forgot about that. So let's just come up here on my line 8, and I'm just going to comment that out for a second, and there we go. And then it goes all the way up. And so now I actually want to put a padding, I think, on the header and the H1. So let's let's just separate these lines out a little bit. And because this is a grouped rule, I don't want to put too big of a padding on it, because it's going to start to double up. So let's do padding of like maybe 0.5 em or something like that. I'm just kind of being lazy to do this quickly right now. I'd probably be a little bit more careful and have these rules separated out, possibly. The other thing too is down at the bottom, the footer is white. So if you wanted to add that in, you could say, hey, footer is going to be included in that. And then you could also, if you wanted, put footer paragraph, so that it gives the footer paragraph a little bit more room. All right, so it looks a little bit better. And then the other thing too that you might, since that maxes out right there, you might want to give the body a background color. So we'll go up here to the body and we'll say background. Actually, first of all, let's look at the assets, and maybe we'll give it a pattern. And I think I like this this one, so I'll copy that. And I'll come over here and I'll paste that in. So we'll say background, and that's background image. I'm just going to say background though. Okay, and let's make sure that it's actually showing up, and it is. You could leave it just white like that if you wanted, but you could also give it, you could give it some sort of background color as well if you wanted. You could give it like a pale, let's go find a color, maybe a pale yellow or something like that, or maybe that color. See how that looks. And it needs to go before the URL, right? And so it gets like this very, very pale color to add to the other color that we see there. And something's going on right here where I've got extra space down below, and I don't think I have anything. Yeah, I don't have anything down there. So let's take a look at my rules and see what's happening. I think maybe my footer P, I've got 0 margins. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happening actually, but I'm not going to dwell on it. That's not the point of this tutorial. And the other thing too that you'll notice down here is that like that 9 starts to bump into here, into that space. So you might want to also look at changing the font size of that a little bit. We could come down and see, it's right here. Maybe that could be like, I don't know, 18 viewport width or something, so that it doesn't overextend its welcome. All right, and so you've got something now that's actually pretty interesting, right? And you could monkey around some more with that H2 that's a link, right? So I'm just not going to keep spending more time with it in this tutorial because I think that you get the idea. The other thing that you could also mess around with, if that's not enough cool stuff for you, is you can also mess around with the blend mode of this particular picture, right? So if you wanted to do something like that, you could come down here and find that image rule where it says row image, and you could set the blend mode for, let's say, mix blend mode, like this, and you could say multiply, or there are several different options, and you see that it turns dark, right? But I actually don't want it to be multiplied whenever I hover. I actually want it to go back to normal. So what I'll do is I'll copy this and I'll change it so that whenever I hover over this, either one of these, I need to be able to make an image rule. Actually, what I'm going to do is I need to copy this because this is the one that the image happens to be inside of, right? So it's in the uh, element that is next to, or the sibling, the next sibling of this particular odd hover. So I'm going to copy that actually, and I'll make a new rule, and it's going to be the IMG that's inside of it, right? And so then I'm going to change my mix blend mode from multiply. Let's copy that, and we'll change it to normal. And then whenever I hover it, it gets nice and bright. All right, and so that's going to do it for this demo. And if you wanted to sort of double check and see what this looks like, here, let's go ahead and save it. I can jump into looking at a new screen, and then you can see how this looks. And as I said before, this font size, it might get a little bit too big, so you'd have to write a media query for it. You know, however you want. But also, if it was a word, it might be kind of interesting if the word was going all the way across. Anyway, you get the idea, and you can play around with this and have a lot of fun. Okay, so that's going to do it for this demo.